What's up, everybody? This is Fred Richani of TSC News. We have right here on the line a very special guest. He is a product of the Monster Factory. He is a product of New York City, right here in the New York area on New York's Manhattan Neighborhood Network. And he is a man making major waves with ROH and New Japan Pro Wrestling and all around North America. He is Punishment Martinez. Mr. Martinez, how's it going?
Going good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on the show. Now, you're a guy that's been around since the early 2000s. I mentioned before, kind of been under the radar. It's funny I say that because it's hard for a guy that's 6'7" and 250 pounds to be under the radar. But you're a guy that's been around for a while, cutting your teeth on the independent scene. And this year, you've really kind of burst on the national scene and worldwide scene with ROH and New Japan Pro Wrestling. Obviously, your look stands out. Your in-ring work's very good. What took you so long to finally make that big splash?
You know, it's one of those things, and I tell younger guys all the time to not waste their time. I love professional wrestling. I always have, but I never really gave it my all. You know, I kind of was that weekend warrior guy, and I kind of coasted by with my size and taking advice from the wrong people. So basically, when I should have been working harder than the next guy next to me, I was just doing enough just to get by. And of course, that shows on a national level, like you said. When you're talking about a TV product, they see through you. And that's why I didn't get opportunities that I thought I should have at the time. It wasn't until I decided to pretty much change my whole life around and dedicate myself to professional wrestling that the opportunities started coming.
And I've talked to a few people that know you a little bit, and they mentioned a word to me that resonated throughout our conversation about you when I was trying to do some research here. They said persistence. They said you're the very definition of persistence in terms of the shape you got yourself into and how much you've improved in the ring over the last few years. And obviously, I would imagine that came after realizing, you know what, I got to get serious about this thing. Can you talk a little bit about that persistence that people talk about when they describe you?
Yeah, so it came down to I was working in Atlantic City, and I was told that either I had to dedicate myself to that job or do the wrestling thing. It was one or the other. I had to quit wrestling if I wanted to continue working there. And without hesitation, I said, you have my 2 weeks notice. And that's when I realized, man, if I'm going to give up a good job or a high paying job for this wrestling dream of mine, I really have to give it my all. And from that day forward, every day I do something to better myself in the world of professional wrestling, whether it's tape study or in the mirror doing promos or going to the gym or in-ring training, cardio, whatever it may be, any aspect of professional wrestling, I try to make it every day that I've got a little bit better. And that including losing over 100 pounds, you know, because I was huge, but I did not work out. I never worked out in the gym, ever. I was always just naturally big. And it was until, like I said, it just one day it hit me. And it basically was one of those, what am I doing with my life moments? And I also changed my surroundings, the people around me. My mind frame was different, where everything was positive. And everything was positive. I tried to draw out all negative things that surrounded my life. I still do. But every day it's a hustle. Every day I try to work harder than the person next to me. And that's how I know I'll stay ahead of the curve, you know?
For sure. That's an amazing story. And you're a product of the Monster Factory. And I believe now you're one of the trainers of the Monster Factory in Paulsboro, New Jersey?
Yeah, it's funny because since I'm still in the business, it's kind of weird being a coach or trainer. So I always say I assist training, you know. But yeah, I've been in-ring training guys for a few years now.
It's pretty cool. And you work with a guy who's become pretty famous last couple of years as well, and Danny Cage. And he's a guy that's no nonsense. all about wrestling 24/7 dedication, but he, like you mentioned about surrounding yourself with positivity, has such a positive mindset on the business. Why do you think you and Danny and the rest of the crew have been so successful over the last few years? For those that don't know, the Monster Factory has been around for a long time. It was founded by Larry Sharp and trained a number of talented wrestlers such as The Big Show, Bam Bam Bigelow. The list goes on and on. You guys can Google it. But I feel like for a while it kind of, not went down, but you didn't really hear about the Monster Factory in the Jersey, New York area. And over the last few years since you've been a part of it and Danny Cage, it's really kind of become, no pun intended, a monster factory for some really talented pro wrestlers.
Yeah, I think it comes down to the passion and love for the business. And we're just, he came to the same conclusion that I did, that, we want this to be part of our lives. We have to do everything possible to make it successful. Now, his point is owning, the school, and he did everything pretty much. When he trained, he always wished it was a certain way. So he made that his goal to make the school the way he wished he could have trained. And man, he motivates you. He pushes you to your limit, but he does it because he wants you to succeed. And that's why I think the school has been so successful, and why we're so close, along with QT Marshall when he was, coaching here as well, with the Blue Meanie and Bill Wiles, which are also coaches at the Monster Factory. It's Dan just draws you in because of his love for the sport and his passion for it. So anything he does and all those motivational videos that he puts out and all those motivational words that he says is all because of his passion of pro wrestling. And when you feel that as well, it's easy to be drawn to that person.
So the guy you see on the internet and on YouTube is the guy you see every day?
Oh, yeah. You're nonstop all day, every day.
Wow, man. Now, you mentioned that you never lifted a weight before for a while. But the funny thing is I found out that your dad was actually a martial artist. So how'd that all work out?
Well, yeah, I didn't lift weights, but I still trained. I was a martial artist first before I was into pro wrestling. I won 2 national championships in full contact fighting in New York under his tutelage. He trained traditional Japanese martial arts since he was a kid, and then passed it on to me. We had multiple martial arts schools in New York, where we trained and traveled for tournaments and whatnot with our students for many years. So that was part of, I guess working out. But I didn't work out. I didn't see the inside of an actual gym. It was when I was in high school, I did football, basketball, baseball, and then I did martial arts as well. And then from there, I took a few years off that I wasn't doing anything. And then finally I decided to be a pro wrestler. And then the training was just the in-ring training there. But once I left there, I didn't really work out at all. That was it.
And with martial arts, was that ever a career path for you? Is that something you thought of and said, man, I want to be like my dad, I want to be like a martial artist and maybe try and make some money off of this, open some schools? Or
No, pro wrestling was always a dream. That, let's say, I used to always joke with my friends about, like, oh man, one day we should do this, it'd be cool, we could be a tag team. But realistically, yeah, the martial arts was something that I thought was going to be my future. I figured that I would have my own schools and I would continue competing. At the time, right before we closed our school, because we moved for about a year or two, we moved to Florida, so we closed the schools down. That's right around when UFC 1 and 2 came out. So when that came out, we were actually thinking about it. My father started training to he was hoping to compete in the UFC. But then once we closed down the school, the training slowed and stopped. So, that goal or dream or whatever, it kind of faded. And then I moved back up north, and it was pretty much, that's where I decided I wanted to be a pro wrestler.
You grew up in the New York area, still reside in the New York area. You got to have some memories of growing up a wrestling fan here. I mean, you're right by the Mecca, Madison Square Garden. Of course, we got Barclays now. There's the Nassau Coliseum. There was the Continental Airlines Arena in Jersey. I mean, this is such a great hub for pro wrestling and some legendary pro wrestling moments. Any memories stand out as a kid?
Oh, I got a ton. My dad would take me to every event that was at Madison Square Garden from the WWE or F
Wow.
at the time. And in the 90s, I went to every single one. I have so many. My favorite, man, I would say Survivor Series in 96. Undertaker came down like a bat. And when Shawn lost the belt to Sid, I was there. That was really cool. That was a good one. Man, there's so many, but that was probably my favorite one. I was there for the click moment.
Oh, the curtain call. Oh, wow, you were there for the curtain call.
Yeah,
It broke kayfabe.
at the time it was cool. Like I'm sitting there in the stands, and it was cool to cheer, but we didn't know that this was going to be such a big moment. Nobody knew. It was just like,
Yeah.
oh man, the good guys and bad guys are hanging out together, But besides that, it was whatever. Like it wasn't that big of a deal. Now it is, because now we know what it meant. But at the time, nobody knew what that meant.
Yeah.
So it was just a cool moment for people, because everybody loved Razor and then Shawn, and then to see them hugging, and then Diesel. They all knew that they were friends at one point. So to see them hug and stuff was cool. The oddball out was Hunter Hearst Helmsley at the time, where it was kind of like, why is he in the ring? Why is he? Because nobody knew that they were all real friends, I mean, a few people did, but the internet wasn't anything back then, so nobody really knew that they were like close. So it's, to me, that was my first reaction, like, why is he in the ring? But that was a cool moment. Now looking back and knowing what it meant, Yeah, those stick out big time.
Who was the wrestler that drew you in?
Undertaker. When I lived, because I was born in New York City, and then when I was a baby, I lived with my mom in Puerto Rico till I was about 10. So Spanish was my first language. I didn't know how to read, speak, or write in English till I was about 11, where I moved back with my dad in New York. So when living in Puerto Rico, as a kid, I liked wrestling. People in the neighborhood liked it too. It came on in random days and times. It always changed, so you never knew when to really follow it. And I liked it more so because my friends liked it, but I didn't really, I don't know, as a kid, I guess from what I could remember, I was more into like Knight Rider and Saved by the Bell. And then till one day when the Undertaker stuffed, locked the Ultimate Warrior in a casket. That day stayed with me, and I was in awe, and because I was drawn in to see if the Ultimate Warrior was going to live or not. And then, but everybody knew Ultimate Warrior; he was like unstoppable. And to see the Undertaker do that to him, I was so drawn to the Undertaker from that day forward, and in love with professional wrestling. That moment made me fall in love with professional wrestling, where I had to watch it every week.
Were you always a big kid, or did there come a point in like high school or something where you just hit a gigantic growth spurt?
That's exactly what happened. No, I wasn't always a big kid. My mom would tell me that I used to ask her, like, what was I ever going to grow? Because everybody was bigger than me. And it wasn't until I moved with my dad and I started playing sports. And then one summer I grew, I don't even know how much, but it was a ridiculous amount, where from one end of the summer to the other, when people that didn't see me saw me, I was towering over everybody. And I had a lot of growing pains with my knees because I grew so fast that my joints couldn't keep up. So I was in a lot of pain. I couldn't sleep at night. My dad would have to give me ice and stuff in the middle of the night because I was crying because I grew so fast. But yeah, that's how it happened with me. I wasn't always that big. It was pretty much when I was about 13, 14 when I really started hitting growth spurts.
And you became a pro wrestler, I believe, in 2004. Were cutting your teeth for a while. Was there ever a point where you're like, man, I haven't been on TV yet. I haven't been signed by a major organization. Maybe I should look into an alternative. Or did you just decide, hey, you know what? I got to keep going?
No, I hit that point, and I stepped away from wrestling for a good 7-8 months. And because I felt like there was nothing for me. I just felt like, and at the time, the Monster Factory was different then. It was run differently. And for instance, I didn't know a whole lot about anything outside of WWE, and the main companies, but like independent wrestling, I didn't know a lot because it wasn't really preached to us. And I never even thought to look outside of, the companies I watched on TV. So I didn't even know that. I did a few indies, but it wasn't like that big of a deal, or even Ring of Honor. Like I wouldn't have like, I wish what I know now I knew then. I probably would have had a better shot of getting noticed a lot earlier. But I was stuck in a rut, and I took a break. Had cut my hair, and then 8 months later, here comes Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels, their first match at WrestleMania 25. And that match drew me so much back into wanting to be in pro wrestling again. And then I went back to the Monster Factory. They had a show, and I stood in the audience and watched the show. And I was like, I have to get back in that ring. I missed this. I love this. And then from that day forward, I was back at it again. And then again in 2013, 12, towards the end of 2012, 2013, that's when I had that moment where I was like, okay, this is balls to the wall. And I'm not going to stop. Where if I fail, I can say, okay, well, I tried my best and I tried my hardest.
Man, seems like you owe the Undertaker a lot. I hope you meet him one day.
I got to meet him in '99, which was really cool, and he was really cool to me. I think I was about 19. I can't remember how old I was, but yeah, he was super cool. That was such a cool moment. I have a picture shaking his hand. It was one of those that I paid to meet him. And I was so worth it. I froze, I was legit starstruck, which is probably the only time that's ever happened to me, but yeah, he is the reason why I got into pro wrestling.
And you mentioned the Undertaker and Shawn Michaels match. That whole feud, that whole build-up was just so great. I mean, I feel like that might be one of the greatest builds in all of pro wrestling. I mean, the first match I think was more of just, two legends that hadn't crossed paths in over a decade, battling it out, having a great match. But then afterwards, the year after, where Shawn Michaels was so obsessed with beating him and putting his career on the line, and I thought it was such great storytelling that, frankly, we don't see enough of these days in pro wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, times have changed where, the world has changed. So it's not to say that it can't be done, because it absolutely can. And we've seen it happen since, where once in a while we get a good build to something and a good story. And that's in every company. But not as much. And that's because just attention spans and that need to give nonstop action and fast pace it's overcome the world, basically. I mean, you see it in movies even, where an action movie now is not what an action movie used to be. An action movie now, to make a lot of money, has to be this epic action nonstop scenes, like the superhero movies, where in yesteryear, if you rewatch the movies, it was a lot more story and it was a little slower paced. But that's, things evolve, things change, and, it is what it is. We got to move on. A lot of us obviously still miss that aspect of storytelling, so that's why we get it from time to time, but not as much as we probably would like.
A company that does some storytelling pretty damn well is Ring of Honor Wrestling. They have over the course of their long history, their 15-year history. They just celebrated their 15th anniversary a few months back, which is unbelievable to think about their humble beginnings. How'd you get linked up with ROH?
In 2013, I believe, I met Kevin Kelly. He came to the Monster Factory to do a seminar. And from that moment on, he specifically pulled me to the side and told me that he wanted me to start showing up at shows that I could get to meet everybody and to do the ROH tryout camp. And I did a tryout camp, and then I started going to the shows, and then I went up to, the booker, basically, and I told him, like, hey, because he's also the head trainer at the ROH dojo, and I said, hey, would you mind if I come by and, train with you guys? And he said, absolutely. And then I started training at their school, just to, not only to obviously get known there and so that they could see me firsthand, but legit, I was in that positive mindset of, let's see what I could learn. I would love to learn something new. And I did. I learned a lot from him. And then we gained that relationship of respect, and, him seeing my, not just my struggle, but my relentlessness, like he was speaking about, where I was, just so determined. And then that led to an opportunity, a dark match. And then that led to the Top Prospect tournament, and then eventually led to me getting a contract.
With ROH comes, of course, the relationship with New Japan Pro Wrestling. And I know you've gotten to work a few dual shows with ROH and New Japan and everything. And earlier this year, you actually got to compete for the NEVER title against Hirooki Goto, which is a huge opportunity for you, given where you came from and all the persistence and everything. I mean, can you describe that feeling? That was in Tokyo, Japan, right?
Yeah, you just saying it again reminded me, just gave me goosebumps all over again. It's one of those surreal things that, not that I forget it happened, but I forget that it really happened, where it's almost like a dream, because it was so surreal. Like I spoke to you about the martial arts, whereas the traditional Japanese martial arts, since I was a kid, I wanted to go to Japan. Originally, it was to train in martial arts, and then that evolved into pro wrestling. But Japan has always been a part of a culture that I was always attracted to, because it started with the martial arts. So just getting to go to Japan was a big deal for me. And then getting to go there to work, because they want me to go, was mind blowing. And then to get the spot that I did, where I think only 3 or 4 guys got singles matches. Everybody else was in tag matches for 2 days straight. I was one of the few, and the one that got a title shot, which is pretty incredible. So the whole feeling, the entire trip was amazing. The experience was second to none. I can't compare it to anything else that has ever happened to me in my life. It was incredible. I was received so well, and everybody there was so good to me. Fans, office, the New Japan personnel, everybody. The entire, I have not one bad thing to say. I had such a great time.
And for those that don't know, New Japan right now is currently killing it in terms of match quality. They're doing very well with their NewJapanWorld.com subscription service. They air on Access TV every Friday night. They just had a live special in Long Beach. And in my humble opinion, I think that probably right now that main event roster, that upper echelon roster, might be the deepest we've seen in a company in God knows how long. I mean, maybe since the days of, when WCW was at its peak in terms of just in-ring. When you were there, in that locker room, in the ring, I mean, can you describe what it's like to be amongst these greats and being able to learn from them?
It's, we spoke how, I started in 2004, but I felt like it was my first day, just looking around and the feeling you get. But everybody's so humble and nice, which was kind of, throws you off a little bit, just because you don't expect that from guys who are seemingly on another level, so to speak. Everybody was humble and nice, but being around everybody and just watching them, go in firsthand in front of their crowd, it was, I was taken aback. Like, that was, besides it being cool, it was impressive. Like, even for me, who I'm in the business, I was so impressed. And the caliber and the quality of their performance, their demeanor, just everything. I was in awe. It was amazing. And all those guys, there's a reason why they're where they are. And there's a reason why they're stars in New Japan. And, the entire roster, there's a reason for it. From top to bottom, every single guy is pure class and professionalism. You cater to your crowd and they know their audience. So that, let's say that strong style that everybody talks about, that's what their audience wants to see. They know how to work their audience. And that was one thing that when I went, of course, I had ideas in my head of what I wanted to do. And then watching them and seeing them, how they put things together and then how they perform, I had to take a step back and say, oh, no, this is the way that I have to do things here. So I did have to pick up on little, nuances and specific things to do in the ring or what not to do, because we're in a different audience and things that I would do normally wouldn't work there. Just like something I would do in the Indies, I wouldn't do in Ring of Honor and vice versa, because it's just different. So those are things that I picked up on. But it's basically, it's a universal language that wrestlers have where, I don't speak Japanese. Someone like Hirooki Goto doesn't speak English. We couldn't communicate, have a conversation, but we went out there and we had a conversation over wrestling through actions. We understood that language, which is awesome. And we had a good pace just because I fed off of him, so it's one of those things where you really have to watch and observe and be able to adapt which luckily for me, I was able to accomplish that in the ring and just pretty much follow his lead. So that was the biggest thing. I just had to pay attention and follow their lead. And I went for the first night, which I was in a 6-man tag. I teamed with Los Ingobernables de Japón. And I was in the ring with Tanahashi, which was amazing. And he came out dressed as one of the boys for Dalton Castle, which was awesome. But it was the same thing. It was one of those things, just watch, follow the lead, and try not to screw up.
That's good advice. Is it safe to say with Ian Riccaboni on commentary, with my friend Leon St. Giovanni, Shaheem Ali, you all in ROH, is it safe to say that the Monster Factory is taken over?
I wouldn't say taken over, but we're definitely leaving our footprint in Ring of Honor. But it goes with Ring of Honor. They don't show favoritism to anybody particular, but they see the hard work, the dedication. They know that if you've made it through the Monster Factory system, that you obviously are probably going to be more dedicated and more willing to sacrifice for this business than others, because at least he knows for a fact how that comes. Not to say that others don't, because obviously there's a lot of professional wrestlers that don't come from the Monster Factory. But I think Ring of Honor sees that, and when guys could perform or they could bring something to the table that might be either different, unique, or something that they need at the moment, if somebody's from the Monster Factory, they're probably going to get a second look because of that pedigree.
Do you have any goals that you can reveal to us that you'd like to accomplish in the next year?
In the next year, I'd like to be in a main event role, whether that's being, more obviously on a regular basis. So that would probably being a champion. So I'd like to hold some gold in Ring of Honor, but also as far as New Japan, Tokyo Dome, G1, those are definite goals of mine.
Well, Mr. Martinez, we definitely wish you the very best. We appreciate the time. Before we let you go, where can fans find you online, and where can they find you in a ring next?
You could find me on Twitter and Instagram. My Twitter handle is @ROH Punishment. They're both the same. And next, you will see me in Atlanta at Center Stage for Ring of Honor, August 26th. That would be the next Ring of Honor event. And I'll also be at the Monster Factory on August 19th at the MFPW, which is the Monster Factory. I will be there as well.
Awesome. Punisher Martinez, thanks so much for the time.
My pleasure. Thank you.